The mid-12th century witnessed a titanic struggle for power in northern Italy. On one side stood the formidable Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick I, known as Barbarossa. His ambition was to restore the full might of imperial authority over the prosperous Italian communes. Opposing him was the Lombard League, a confederation of northern Italian city-states. These cities, including Milan, Venice, and Bologna, had grown wealthy through trade and cherished their hard-won autonomy. They fiercely resisted the emperor's attempts to impose his will and levy heavy taxes. The conflict was not merely political but also deeply ideological, pitting the universal claims of the empire against the particular liberties of the communes. Pope Alexander III, himself in a protracted dispute with Barbarossa, gave his blessing to the Lombard League. This papal support lent a crucial layer of legitimacy to the city's cause. Barbarossa had already led several campaigns into Italy, seeking to crush this resistance. In 1162, his forces had utterly destroyed the city of Milan, a brutal act intended to terrorize other communes into submission. However, this brutality only stiffened the resolve of the Lombard cities. In 1167, they secretly met and formed the Lombard League, bound by a solemn oath to defend their freedom. The stage was set for a decisive confrontation. In late 1175, Frederick Barbarossa was in Italy on his 5th campaign. He had besieged the newly constructed city of Alessandria, a fortress named in honor of his papal adversary. The siege proved to be a miserable failure, dragging on through a harsh winter. The defenders of Alessandria, mockingly calling their city Straw City, held out with surprising tenacity. In the spring of 1176, with his army weakened, Barbarossa lifted the siege. Peace talks were initiated at Montebello, but they quickly collapsed. The Lombard League demanded full recognition of their rights, a price the emperor was unwilling to pay. Barbarossa, frustrated and impatient, decided to seek a military solution once and for all. He knew, however, that his current force was insufficient for a major battle. He had sent word across the Alps for reinforcements to join him. A substantial force of German knights and soldiers was marching south to bolster his army. Barbarossa separated from the main body of his army, taking a smaller, mobile force of elite cavalry. His plan was to rendezvous with these reinforcements near Lake Como. The Lombard League's leaders were aware of the emperor's strategy. They understood the critical danger of allowing the two German armies to unite. To prevent this, they mobilized their own forces, primarily from the city of Milan. The Lombard army was a citizen force, a testament to the communal spirit of the cities. It consisted of cavalry, composed of nobles and wealthy citizens, and a much larger body of infantry. At the heart of their army was a sacred and symbolic object, the carrocchio. The carrocchio was a large, four-wheeled war wagon, drawn by a team of oxen. It was adorned with the city's banners and an altar. Losing the carrocchio in battle was considered the ultimate disgrace. It served as the army's rallying point and the embodiment of its honor. The infantrymen swore oaths to defend it to the death. Among the Lombard forces was a legendary group known as the Company of Death. This was a band of several hundred elite warriors who had sworn to die rather than retreat. Their purpose was to form the final, unbreakable defense of the carrocchio. The Lombard army marched out of Milan, intending to block Barbarossa's path. On the morning of May 29th, 1176, the two armies stumbled upon each other near the small town of Legnano. The encounter was unexpected, leaving no time for elaborate tactical preparations. The battle began when the Lombard vanguard of 700 cavalry clashed with the emperor's 3,000-strong advance force. Professional German knights, heavily armored and battle-hardened, quickly gained the upper hand. They charged with overwhelming force, their lances and swords cutting through the Lombard ranks. The Lombard cavalry, outnumbered and outmatched, was routed and forced to flee the field. Barbarossa, sensing a swift victory, was exultant. He believed the battle was already won. Now, only the Lombard infantry, clustered around their sacred wagon, remained. The emperor ordered his knights to charge and capture the Carroccio. He knew its capture would shatter the morale of the citizen army. German knights, confident and victorious, began their thunderous charge across the field. But the Lombard infantry did not break. They formed a dense pike square around the Carroccio, a bristling wall of steel and courage. The first wave of the imperial charge crashed against this wall of spears. Knights and horses were thrown to the ground, their momentum broken by the disciplined infantry. The German cavalry recoiled, regrouped, and charged again. And again, the citizen soldiers held their ground, their pikes a deadly forest. The battle raged around the Carroccio, a desperate struggle of attrition. The infantrymen fought with the desperation of men defending their homes and their honor. Meanwhile, the routed Lombard cavalry had not entirely dispersed. They managed to regroup and were joined by fresh cavalry from nearby Brescia. Seeing the infantry's heroic stand, they were inspired to return to the fight. This reformed cavalry force then executed a daring maneuver. They charged into the rear of the imperial army, which was still focused on breaking the infantry square. The surprise attack threw the German knights into confusion. Suddenly, they were fighting a battle on two fronts. At this critical moment, the tide of the battle turned decisively. Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, fighting in the thick of the battle, was unhorsed. His standard-bearer was killed, and the imperial eagle banner fell to the ground. The emperor himself disappeared from sight in the swirling melee. A cry went up through the German ranks. The emperor is dead. The loss of their leader and their standard shattered the morale of the imperial army. Panic began to spread like wildfire. Sensing the shift, the Lombard infantry surged forward from behind their wall of pikes. The Company of Death led a ferocious charge into the wavering enemy. The imperial army, caught between two forces and believing their emperor slain, completely broke. What followed was not a retreat, but a desperate, chaotic rout. The Lombards pursued them relentlessly for miles. Many imperial soldiers were cut down as they fled. Others drowned trying to cross the Ticino River to safety. The Lombard League had won an astonishing and total victory. They captured a vast amount of loot, including the emperor's personal shield. For 3 days, there was no sign of Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. Many in his own camp, and all among the Lombards, believed him to be dead. However, the resilient emperor had survived. He eventually made his way to the loyal city of Pavia, revealing he was alive. But his army was shattered, and his prestige had suffered a devastating blow. The military option was now off the table. The Battle of Legnano forced the proud emperor to seek peace. In 1177, in the Peace of Venice, Barbarossa made a public reconciliation with Pope Alexander III. He acknowledged Alexander as the rightful pope, ending the long-standing schism. This was a major diplomatic victory for the papacy. A 6-year truce was signed with the Lombard League. Finally, in 1083, the Peace of Constance was concluded. This treaty formally recognized the rights and liberties of the Italian communes. The cities were granted the right to elect their own officials, make their own laws, and administer their own territories. In return, They formally acknowledged the emperor's overlordship, a largely symbolic gesture. The Battle of Legnano was a landmark event in medieval history. It was one of the first major victories of a citizen infantry army over a professional feudal cavalry force. It demonstrated that disciplined and motivated infantry could defeat the elite knights of the age. The victory secured the independence of the northern Italian city-states for centuries to come. This autonomy allowed for the flourishing of the Renaissance in these very cities. The battle became a powerful symbol of Italian nationalism and resistance against foreign domination. Its memory was invoked during the Risorgimento, the movement for Italian unification. Giuseppe Verdi even composed an opera, La Battaglia di Legnano, to celebrate the event. The battle's name is enshrined in the lyrics of the Italian national anthem, Il Canto degli Italiani. The Lombard League's victory was a triumph of communal will over imperial ambition. It proved that unity and a fierce desire for freedom could overcome even the most powerful military forces of the era. The echoes of the clash at Legnano resonated through the corridors of European history. The emperor's dream of a fully subjugated Italy was shattered on that May morning. The Lombard infantry had held the line. The Carroccio, the heart of the army, had been saved. The cities had defended their right to exist as self-governing entities. The battle was a lesson for kings and emperors everywhere. It showed the rising power of the common man when organized and motivated. The feudal order, based on the supremacy of the mounted knight, had been challenged. The victory was not just military, but profoundly psychological. It fostered a sense of civic pride and identity that would define the Italian city-states. Barbarossa would remain a powerful figure, but his relationship with Italy was forever changed. He learned that cooperation could achieve what force could not. The Lombard League, having achieved its primary goal, eventually dissolved. But its legacy of collective defense and liberty endured. The fields of Legnano returned to quiet farmland. But the memory of the battle fought there became immortal. It stood as a testament to the enduring power of a people united in the cause of freedom. The initial imperial confidence was a stark contrast to the eventual outcome. The Lombard pikemen's discipline was the bedrock of their defense. The return of the Lombard cavalry was the hammer blow that sealed the victory. The fall of the imperial standard was a potent symbol of defeat. The psychological impact on the German troops was immediate and catastrophic. The battle's aftermath reshaped the political landscape of Italy. The emperor's authority was henceforth limited by law and treaty. Commune's victory was a beacon of hope for other cities in Europe. The story of Legnano is a story of how the few and the determined can defy the mighty. It was a day when merchants and craftsmen stood as equals to feudal lords. The sacred Carroccio was more than a wagon. It was the soul of the city. The oxen that drew it were themselves revered symbols of patience and strength. The Lombard League strategy was to force a confrontation before Barbarossa could consolidate his power. The unexpected encounter meant that raw courage would play as large a role as strategy. The flight of the Lombard cavalry could have spelled disaster. But the infantry's stand turned a potential rout into a tactical opportunity. The battle was a symphony of desperate moments and heroic stands. The cost of victory was high, with many casualties on both sides. But the price of freedom had been paid in full. The legend of the Company of Death would be told for generations. Their suicidal bravery embodied the League's absolute commitment. Barbarossa's personal bravery was never in doubt, fighting amongst his men. But his tactical overconfidence led to his downfall. The victory at Legnano was a defining moment for the concept of Italian identity. It demonstrated that a common cause could unite disparate and often rivalrous cities. The world of chivalry was forced to acknowledge the power of the citizen. Ultimately, the battle was a victory for a new way of life.